The most widely published book in human history reveals that we are created in the image of God. Throughout our human journey, each encounter is an opportunity to see the shared humanity in ourselves and others. Regardless of one's views on religion, each experience and each story weaves us together towards a common path of transformation, a process of growth and understanding, a recognition that, at our core, we share a common destiny. What does the search for truth really mean in our lives? How can we find a sense of unity in a world so diverse and divided? As we reflect on these questions, we start to uncover a fundamental connection that binds us all beyond our differences. Welcome to Created in the Image of God, Building Vibrant Communities, with our host, Wade Franson. Today's episode is Fear, Trauma, and Oneness.
Hey everyone, it's Wade Franson. I am back with another exciting, entertaining, deep episode of Created in the Image of God. We have a returning guest today. Last time he was here, he was just off of a retreat where he had not spoken for some unimaginable amount of time for me. And we went deep into trauma. And today we wanted to talk about fear and see where that goes. His name is Michael Stone, and he has just an amazing background. He's out in California, and we'll let him briefly introduce himself and unpack that background again here at the beginning. Welcome, Michael. Great to be with you, Wade. So give us the synopsis of your journey, where you're at today on this fine November day.
Well, I've got 80 years. But basically, I was born into trauma. I'm kind of a trauma poster child. My parents were at Pearl Harbor. They were in the middle of the bombing. My father was a fighter pilot. My mother, a assistant to the Pacific Fleet. Both were severely impacted. I was born right afterwards, right at the bombing of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and my mother particularly was really impacted, what you would call PTSD today, and tried to kill me for the first 2.5 years, and then I found her hanging. Then I had another hanging of my dog when I was 7. I had a lot of abuse and stepmothers. An absent father who was gone. I went to military schools. And then when I was close to 30, I had a wonderful wife and a child. And when my child was 4 years old, my wife was raped and murdered. And for 42 years, I lived under the suspicion of the murder until DNA evidence finally released that. And that kind of sent me on a journey from very early on of a spiritual journey. It didn't start out a spiritual journey, but the more I studied and the more I listened to my body and what felt true to me, the more I aligned with the sacredness of life and of doing the inner work that connects us more deeply with God and opens us to healing the wounds that separate, alienate, and marginalize us.
Yeah, and every time I hear you give that brief overview, I'm just speechless, and for several reasons. One is it always evokes in me that challenging statement about Jesus, that he learned obedience through the things he suffered. And I'm also floored by the fact that I don't detect any sense of, victimhood, right? In other words, that you've come through all this with the full realization of God chastens every son whom he loves, and not that this is necessarily the chastening, but that no trial seems pleasant while we're going through it, but afterward it brings forth fruit. And as we think about the focus that you have on this highest level order of oneness, and how we're truly all connected. And despite all this, your focus isn't on, the fragmented pieces, the scattered pain, the fragmentation, but rather on the wholeness and the oneness. These are the things that go through my mind as I hear you, tell us about what you went through. Is that sort of a fair summary?
Yeah, I think it's very clear. However, I certainly was a victim in the first 3 decades. I mean, I played the victim card. I was into
Naturally.
drugs and alcohol and basically trying to be seen and get the love that I didn't get as a child. When I discovered that in an event I was doing, I discovered, wait a minute, do you mean I'm responsible for my own life? That was a huge awakening. And that began to really deepen my journey. And, the thing you said about obedience, I don't like that word so much, but it does say for me that I continue to come more in alignment with the part of God that I am, that the sacredness of my own life is the sacredness of God, that there's no separation. We were talking earlier about the bifurcation, the simplicity in my feeling of divine law is not two, and that there is no separation. So for me, that when you say obedience, I say turn towards that which separates us from that separates us from God. And that turning toward means to turn toward hatred, to turn towards trauma, to turn towards suffering, to turn towards whatever. Rumi has a wonderful poem called The Guest House. You probably know, and he talks about invite the suffering into your home, invite it in, even if it's a crowd of sorrows or they tear your house apart, they may be bringing you some gift that you don't know is going to happen. And I think for me as a trauma professional, that I'm always looking for where is the divine and the intelligence, where's the divine intelligence in your pain and in your suffering, that if you could turn to and feel it fully and allow it to rest in you, would create a larger capacity for your soul to grow and exist in a lack of separation. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. And we could look at different translations of that verse and what the Aramaic or the Greek word is, maybe alignment, conformity, submission. What is it exactly that was learned?
Obedience sounds very Catholic.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to look up some different translations and find out what maybe is a better word. But the point is, Jesus said that he did the will of the Father.
Yeah.
And the divine will, right? The submission to the divine will, alignment with the divine purpose, however we want to word that. So we picked on the word fear. And what comes to mind for me is Jesus' statement, perfect love casts out fear, and that the opposite of love it has often been said, I don't know how specific or rigid I want to get about this, what is actually the opposite of love, but it has been said many times that fear is the opposite of love versus hate. How do you feel about that, or how would you define fear? Or
I feel that's a mistake to think that. And why I think that is, you're immediately bifurcating love and hate. There are times when we need to deeply feel our hatred and allow ourselves to feel it because fear, to use fear as an opportunity for spiritual growth and for soul growth, is to turn towards it, because fear is not something to eliminate. So if I'm making that bifurcation, then I'm going to say I have to eliminate the fear in my, eliminate the hate in my life. But no, the hate is calling us to look at something that we carry in our life and recognize how it separates us. It's not, fear is not something to eliminate. It's we need to invite it into a deeper grounding of healing and spiritual growth, and meet it with presence and with co-regulation. We talked about co-regulation last time, with connection, and engage with the fear. But what we try to do is get rid of the fear, or push the fear down, or eliminate the fear. All of those things only cause the nervous system to raise their protection and diminish our spiritual self, really. So everything is like, when you look at fear, it's an invitation. So instead of trying to escape or find, the bifurcation of it, the hate and fear as opposites, they live in the same thing. Can I love my fear? Can I love my hate? That's really hard. If I love my hate and bring presence to it, it will actually dissolve, because I'm not carrying it as something out there. My hatred is in here. So it's the part that needs to heal in me. So by bringing more presence to it, and looking at the, well, I have this hate towards these people. What is actually true there? I have fear. Fear is a source of hatred. So what am I afraid of? And it could go back through many generations that's carrying there. But I need to bring more and more presence to that in order to find the hate and love are really the front and the back and the hands of some way. They're not opposite. They coexist. When I bring them together and recognize, myself not as an ego or a separate individual. And I think we've talked before about the difference between individualism and individuation. Our developmental phase, if we have co-creation with a caring parent or a caregiver, and we're felt, seen, heard, held, and protected, then that co-regulation teaches us how to self-regulate. But if we didn't have that, we can't handle and self-regulate our deep emotions and passions and hatred and feelings and suffering that come up. So when we meet it with awareness and presence, it becomes a source of clarity and a catalyst for growth. So so much of our hate or fear that we carry has been handed down for infinite numbers of generations, passed on from one generation to the next. They're legacy burdens. Let's say my parent was in World War I or World War II, and they had to shoot some people, and it turned out they were innocent. And then the shame and the fear of that I carry gets locked in the body and gets passed down, kind of like a contract with future generations, until one person does the looking and the exploration and says, well, wait a minute. What is this? What is this shame and this fear and this hatred that I carry? What is the source of that? And I begin to really pay attention and bring more awareness. And that bringing presence to fear moves us beyond the instinct of fight, flight, freeze, and allows us to integrate those parts of us that are causing suffering in us. So, and this is dealing with, what is my true self? You know, Thich Nhat Hanh has a wonderful poem about that. Who am I? Who is my true self? You know, and he says, you know, I'm the girl that was raped on the boat by the pirates, and I'm the pirate, and I'm the, you know, all of those things live and exist in me. But when we start making it about out there, then we're missing our divine connection and the absolute what is the word I'm looking for? The absolute connection with all of life being part of me. And that's, I think, the work we have to do as Christians or whatever, you know, or just people who are looking to heal the brokenness and the woundedness and the sense of separation that we carry, that's where we need to bring our awareness is no separate self, you know, and that's hard for people to get because you're over there and I'm over here and we're on a screen, but we still have this sense of objects in a world of objects. But this is where all the nonsense about separation and hatred and, you know, distancing myself or absencing myself, all of these are that we're not dealing with it because we're not a separate self. You know, my ancestors, everything that ever happened to me in my history is in my body. It's the Akashic record of my body, and everything that will happen. There's, you know, it always happens in presence. So you know, when I start saying, you are doing this to me, it's your fault, I'm creating this false sense of separation. But, you know, love is allowing myself to feel it all, but not to use it to be separate, because separation is a lack of wholeness from the divine. I'm going on a little bit, but I think
that's wonderful, and I think that's a great place to pause and segue. We'll probably do a quick commercial break here. This is being pre-recorded, but when we come back, I'm going to unpack a couple of things that you've brought up during that discourse. Thank you so much for that. I was just listening intently and hanging on every word. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
For over 50 years, Michael Stone has walked the path of transformation as a spiritual author, teacher, organizational consultant, somatic guide, and trauma integration facilitator. His work bridges ancient mystical practices with modern healing modalities, guiding people to heal the individual, familial, ancestral, and collective wounds that keep us separate and in conflict. In his newest release, Traumatized, a love story, healing the wounds that separate, alienate, and marginalize us, he opens a profound invitation to heal through love, the force that unites us all. Michael's journey is an invitation to awaken, to remember our shared belonging, and to step into a deeper wholeness together. Discover more at welloflight.com.
Welcome back to Created in the Image of God with Michael Stone today. We've just had Michael sort of lay out his perspective on fear, trauma, oneness, and we're going to unpack a couple of things, peel back a couple of layers of the onion here. The first thing is, let's talk about oneness. We recently had a meeting with some friends of ours. We go to a nursing home every Sunday morning, and we have a spiritual family that's been built there over the last few years by invitation of some of the ones there. We've talked a lot about the soul, the afterlife. People are forming strong bonds, deep bonds, even as they frankly prepare for passage into the next life in this nursing home. And it's just been amazing. And what we did this past weekend was pull quotes from all the world's religions, organized religion, also traditional religions of indigenous people, around the oneness of God, using the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God, the Lord is one, and that we're one with God, and showing how this is inherent in the spiritual teachings of every people, every religion, every spiritual impulse has this at its core. So what I want to ask you, Michael, is to further define what you mean when you talk about the individual versus individuation, because you mentioned that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's mostly invisible to people, and I think it's really important. So what is individuation? Individuation is how we mature. Individuation starts with my early development, even in utero, but particularly in my development as a person. If I am felt, seen, heard, held, and protected as a child by my caregiver, and I have a pair of loving eyes looking into my eyes, I have the capacity to then self-regulate, because it's co-regulation first. That teaches me how to self-regulate. That teaches me how to be able to be in the world and have a sense of a self. Okay. And the more love, the more capacity I have as a self. So that's individuation. It's a natural process. Individualism, rugged or romantic individualism, on the other hand, is my identity. And this is very much at the heart of the separation that exists. Like we're taught to be the man, the self-made man, or the self-made woman, or the rugged individual, or the romantic individual. I did it on my I did it on my own. The song.
I did it my way.
I did it my way. Yeah, I did it my way. Everything in our advertisements, everything, particularly in the United States, is calling for me to rise up and be a strong individual. And it's that kind of strength creates a huge weakness, that sense of separate, because I'm much more as two or three or four or community than I am as an individual. And I live in a false sense of separation. Again, talking about the fact you're over there and I'm over here, that sense of objects in a world of objects. But there's a whole nother way to know each other. And that's, to me, the Christian way, is that I can only know you, Wade, to the circumference of my capacity to know myself. When I can develop myself to know what my hidden parts, my trauma, my shadow parts, those parts I don't want anybody to see, and certainly I don't want to, feel them even. That kind of individualism is a huge weakness that keeps us separate. Whereas if I look at you as from my nervous system, you show up in my nervous system. I know you in my nervous system. I can feel you. I can feel, how you feel, your emotions. I can sense into you and we all have this capacity. How, minds speak to minds, bodies speak to bodies, emotions speak to emotions. But we've lost the capacity to feel each other. And that creates a rugged individual, because we have no capacity for empathy, for connection, for really truly loving. An individual does not love. One who's individuated knows how to love because knows the connection. It's kind of like, when I work with students, I can look at the moon. The full moon is really great right now. I don't know if you've seen it back there.
Oh yeah, the last couple of nights, just amazing here.
It's so bright and so beautiful. I look up and I say, that moon is so beautiful. But what is it I'm not seeing at that moon? I'm not seeing, unless I'm really sensitive, that it's affecting me. It's affecting the oceans. It's affecting the plants, everything that's moving in my body. If you go to a hospital on a full moon, you'll see there's so many people coming in, because it also stirs up all the insanity in us. because we're, 70% water. The moon is moving us. I think the same way with my students. I look at my students and I see them, but then I feel them. And then I feel their ancestors behind them so that I can understand more why they're that. And then I see the culture in them. And when I can see, the ancestors in you, the sensing into your physical, emotional, and mental well-being in you, then I realize, oh, the only way I know that is by knowing myself. I can't know you past the degree that I can know myself. Otherwise, I'm just projecting. I think we talked about listening, the levels of listening last time we were together. It's the level of just projecting on you. That's how most of the world is doing it. And then, in better moments, we're reflecting like, oh yeah, there's a person out here and he's saying things and I can hear the things he's saying, but it's still kind of two-dimensional, like watching a movie. And then I can go, well, I wonder what it's like to be in his shoes. So then I start feeling you, sensing you, being you, and I can go, wow, there's a lot going on here. I can feel sadness or grief. I can feel joy. I can feel love. I can feel compassion. But am I feeling it in you? No, I'm feeling it in me, feeling it in you, feeling it in me. And that's, I think, God's design.
Well, allow me to throw out a song lyric here. There's a band that really spoke to me when I was senior in high school and just graduated. Graham Parker and the Rumor. You probably never heard of them. Post-punk band coming out of the pub rock scene in England. And he had this album called Squeezing Out Sparks, which just really made an impression. One of the songs on there was called Protection. And one of the lines in that song was, "It's not the knife through the heart that tears you apart. It's the thought of someone sticking it in."
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about, that movement, and it's what's happening in me, right? So I've got the knife, but what's really bothering me is you just stabbed me. You follow me? It's so you've got those two things, and I want to unpack that a little further in a little bit, but let's just talk about that right now. The power of that emotion, right? The power of those feelings that the empathy or the perception or the interpretation of what's happening around us. You mentioned for your own journey that the first 30 years of your life, you were a victim. And I described my early life as I was wrapped around the axle. I was wrapped around the axle of the circumstances of my life, and it took me decades to get over it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And even that terminology I know is problematic, and a therapist wouldn't use it, but whatever. It took me decades to, and really there were even things that happened when I eventually wrote my story across 3 volumes. It took me a decade. And that process of getting it out on paper and externalizing it was therapeutic.
Yeah, that's true for my book too. The last 4 years of writing the book really brought it clear after 80 years. But I'm not clear. Do you have a question about that, or you just?
Yeah. So the again, it's really still getting back to individual and individuation, right? And as a Baha'i, we have a little prayer that when you give birth, you whisper that prayer into the baby's ear right at birth to let them know that they're loved and that they're received and that they're welcomed into the world and that they will be cared for and protected.
That's so beautiful. And I often think of the prayers that we're actually whispering into the ears of our baby by our actions, by our relationship with our partners, the mother or father, that the prayer isn't just words. What's the saying that it's not what you tell your child, it's what you do that will shape their life.
Well, yeah, remember the old saying, "This is going to hurt me a lot worse than it's going to hurt you."
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's not what the child feels in that moment. Those
Exactly.
words are rather empty and hollow.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
So yeah, the question is really, it's really that individuation, right? And the fact that, okay, this kind of work that you're talking about, this kind of perspective, but then you have a responsibility to create a world in which people are protected from that knife being stuck in by somebody, right? And sometimes those protective actions require some kind of constraint or some kind of force, some kind of structure that has to be built and enforced and maintained. I often look at it this way. Jesus said we must forgive. But he also gave parables in which if this or this happens, you will be taken to court until you pay the last farthing, right? And even phrases such as turn the other cheek, they are based on Jewish law in which the master had the right to backhand their slave. That's where that phrase comes from, turn the other cheek. If you get backhanded, turn the other cheek. But if the master hauls off and hits you with the forehand, you can take him to court. And all three of these major statements, turn the other cheek, go the extra mile, give them the shirt off your back, have a corresponding legal recourse that you can take. So you must forgive, but that doesn't say that you don't seek justice to stop that rapist or that thief from inflicting that same harm on somebody else. You may, in fact, I would submit, have a responsibility before God to take that person to court and pursue justice, because you can forgive, and I would stipulate you must forgive whether the person repents or not. Your forgiveness is not dependent on that person's repentance, but the next victim's safety is dependent on that person's repentance.
Yeah, so much in what you're saying here. Let's start with forgiveness, because I'm not a big fan of forgiveness. And the reason I'm not is that so often forgiveness is something like that, like this. Me in my largesse is going to forgive you in your smallness. That's very different than looking, like I say, when I work with people, I'm looking back generations, I'm feeling the ancestral pull, looking at someone and being curious about, I wonder how this person got this way. So, to me, it's not so much forgiveness, it's using whatever you think needs to be forgiven to look at yourself. How did I create the conditions? Even in something of being raped or mugged or any of these things. Why do we have laws? Why do you think we have laws? We have laws because we're separate from divine law. The only need for, if we were in touch with our divinity and allowed ourselves to live truly a spiritual life, there would be no need for laws. We wouldn't do the things, because law is based on the belief in separation, in a separate self. But if I actually realize I'm not separate from other people, I'm not separate from the earth, I'm not on the earth or in the earth, I am the earth. I am the ecosystem. I'm an ecosystem within ecosystems. And so, and to bring it back to fear is a wonderful signpost for evolution. When you look at what's arising in us, even fear and grief, as part of the world's and our own detoxification and in an evolutionary process, offering us a chance for deeper connection and renewal, then that's a whole different place. I don't need to be a separate self. I'm looking to see where's wholeness with this person. If this person triggers something in me and I say, you make me so mad, or you're dissing me or whatever, then I'm not taking the opportunity to actually feel, what is this anger that's coming up with me? Can I love this anger? Can I hold it? Can I be with it? And then that maturation of the individuation tenderizes me so that I can, instead of, blaming it out there, it's all part of what's happening in me. And I can go, really interesting. This person is here yelling at me and arguing with me. Where's the love? Where's the connection? What's, what is it that's needed within us, between us right now to bring wholeness?
Could not agree more about the responsibility of the individual and how to process all this, but that doesn't address the fact that, or the perspective, fact is overstated, but the perspective that this person did harm, destroy, hurt, cause trauma, cause additional trauma, and whether there was a, I guess there's one way of looking at this would be Newton's laws of physics or karma or whatever, that there was a series of events that led to this, not denying that at all, but there's an opportunity and a responsibility to break that chain,
Oh, yeah. But you
don't
break it by that person, you break it by breaking it within ourselves. That's maturation.
Right, but again, so what responsibility does the Catholic Church have when a priest has been identified as a pedophile? To just use one example, I could use a million others, or a serial rapist, or a serial killer, right? There are many shows out there on Netflix and, Amazon Prime about serial killers, right? Who are going around killing people serially, serial kidnappers, and so on and so forth.
Well, that's what I meant.
We're gonna take a really quick break, and when we come back, we'll have you answer that question. Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
We'll be sitting on the edge of our seat, waiting to see how Michael Stone answers that question. We'll be right back.
Every child deserves a place where they feel seen, safe, and supported. Those who guide children also carry the responsibility to protect them. Written by 2 legal experts with over 60 years of experience, this essential resource helps organizations build strong child protection policies, recognize risks, train the right people, and respond when it matters most. From schools to churches to mentoring programs, this is a blueprint for real protection, made practical, sustainable, and clear. Protecting other people's children. A powerful tool for those who choose to care. Available now at Amazon.
Welcome back to Created in the Image of God with Michael Stone. Right before the break, I asked Michael, what about serial perpetrators, serial harmers, serial inflictors of trauma? What is an individual's and society's responsibility to change that, other than just the work I need to do on myself?
Yeah. Well, this goes back to what I said. Why do we have laws? We have laws because we've lost our way. We are not living a life that is honoring divine law and the message of God. So we have to have laws to deal with things like that because we haven't yet learned enough. But at the same time, I'm in the courtroom with the person that murdered my wife. I want him to say, I did this. 42 years just to say, I did this. So I could make something, about, oh, well, I should forgive him. But it's not, again, about forgiveness. It's this person, I'm sitting in the, in the courtroom with the person who has been free for 42 years, who murdered my wife, and he won't speak or honor that. He's got to carry that. One of the greatest things of the 20th century, from my perspective, was the Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa that Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela did. They took the perpetrators and they sat them down with the victims, and the perpetrators said, had to say, come to the place where they can say, I did this, and that creates a completion with the other person. So that's the real kind of forgiveness, when there's that kind of energy. But until people are willing to do their own personal work, and I'll push on that, until they're willing to do the personal work, we have to have laws. But the more we do the work, it affects our ancestors that are part of the perpetrators that are coming through us, and it affects the collective, and brings healing to the collective and to the ancestors. And this is what needs to happen from an evolutionary perspective if we're going to survive as a species. But just having a law, is not dealing with the actual what's happening in the human being and the developmental and individuated maturity that needs to happen for us to be a living expression of God's law.
Well, again, agree with everything. I think one of the perhaps issues, if you will, to use that word, around the word forgiveness, Einstein said, and I love this quote, things should be made as simple as they can be and no simpler. So the word forgiveness may in that sense be an oversimplification of what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But I would submit you have to approach it with an attitude of forgiveness in order for that to even work. And again, we could quibble about what word is being used. What word would you prefer? That the attitude that you bring to that discussion.
Yeah, the simplification, the simplification that I would bring to it is not to. Anytime there's a sense of separate self, I sat there looking in the courtroom to this person who would not honor it, and I could feel in me that, and I allowed myself to feel it, the hatred and the killer in me that wanted to kill the person. I did that, and I wouldn't call that forgiveness. I would call that doing my personal inner work, my shadow work, to bring that up. So I used that situation over time. It didn't happen right away, but over time, to heal that part of me that has rage, that has, the potential of killing someone or hating someone. Let's just keep it at hating someone.
So is there a word you could use to describe that whole process that you're?
Yeah, self-actualization.
Okay.
Spiritual self-actualization. That doesn't mean, it never means that I'm condoning the behavior that was causing the harm. I'm not in any way condoning that behavior. But I am honoring the fact that I could have had I had that person's background, I could have potentially done the same thing.
Well, okay, so we've had a situation where my sister was struck by a vehicle driven by a man who, in his police report, was way over the alcohol limit.
Mm-hmm.
And she was killed in that accident.
Mm-hmm.
And the court date for the hearing has been continued now repeatedly, right? It was actually supposed to be November 4th, and it was continued again. Now it's December 18th, which happens to be the day that we're flying to Hawaii. And I've been wanting to fly to this other state and be there for that hearing as my sister's brother, because I also believe that somebody needs to appear in court to represent my sister, who's not there, in the accounting of what happened. To your point exactly, I do want to hear the other person say those words, show that he's taking responsibility for his part in that accident. And I would say I have to bring an attitude of forgiveness, knowing that I was in a car with my mother, who was an alcoholic, and she was driving around, and she could have easily done that. I've also probably been behind the wheel of a car when I shouldn't have, a time or two in my life. I've also been inattentive. I remember a couple of maybe even close calls. I've been in a couple of accidents. You follow me? Any one of us could have done that. But again, there's a law that you don't drive when you have that situation. And apparently that law was broken, allegedly, whatever. I'm careful now what I'm saying because this is going out live and I don't want to say anything that would cause any issue. And I'm not mentioning any names, but there's a situation that's being investigated and looked at. And my personal feelings that I bring to that event are exactly that, a holding of accountability, while at the same time I personally have to bring an attitude of forgiveness, my words. Or you could say but to me the term self-actualization have a certain ring to them that, yeah, I'm doing this for me. And I am, of course. If you don't, I would have said, if you don't forgive, you're only hurting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing that for yourself as much as you are for the other person. Again, discussing a difficult context here, or difficult concept that has many facets. But the point is, when you say law, that's just an abstract. People have to make those laws. People have to enforce those laws.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
Having a
first of
law
all,
is pointless if it's not enforced.
well, first of all, I want to just offer my condolences for your loss. I feel the grief in what you're saying, and I want you to know I'm feeling that, and that I want to honor it. It's important to do that, and also to acknowledge that we live in a broken system. This guy got off scot-free 44 years ago now, who was a brutal rape and murder. And he got off because...
Were there any instances since then that you're aware of?
Don't know. We don't know. But what happened was that they arrested him on a traffic warrant. So they threw out all that. They lost the picture with the scratches on his face that from the mugshot disappeared. So we live with a broken system. And if you look at what's happening in the United States right now, it's really revealing how deeply broken it is. So, what I'm saying is, yes, we need to have laws, but the reason that we need to have laws is we aren't doing our own soul work, our own growth, our own spiritual work. And when
absolutely. I mean, I just wrote and published the 8th of 9 installments about no kings because of the no king movement. And I go back because it's always about the Bible for me, even though I'm a Baha'i. I love the Bible and its richness of historical stories. So you go back to the book of Judges, in which there was no king in Israel. You got this horrible unfolding of trauma in every imaginable way. And the conclusion is, in that day, there was no king in Israel, and every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Fast forward to the next book, and you have the book of Kings 1 and 2, and you learn that as a result, the people said, we want a king, right? And they went to Samuel and they asked for a king. And Samuel went to God and said, but now the people want a king. And God says, they haven't rejected you, but they've rejected me, that I should not rule over them. Go and tell them, you get a king, and he's going to do this, 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 and this, and this, and this, and you're not going to like it, and you're going to come crying to me saying, remove this king, right? So, and we have this no kings movement, and I wrote this 9-part series. Yes, it's fundamentally broken, right? But meanwhile, along the way, we have this yin yang situation in which we have to organize and structure. We all have to go to work, whether it's growing your own food or however you get to feed yourself and your family within this broken system, within the 10,000 layers of the onion that we're inside of brokenness. We talked about the doctrine of discovery in our discussions, and how going back to the 1,000 years ago and more, that a construct was created around how certain groups of people were entitled to go own the land that they discovered, right? And how that led to a further, an ongoing hairball, that can't be, Gordian knot. And and we have to live within it. And we all have our jobs to do, whether you're a fireman or an accountant or a policeman or a janitor or a nurse or a doctor. I can't imagine being a doctor living within the current medical industrial complex that has been constructed, and I deal with some limited amount of laws and regulation, in the fields that I am. I actually deal with a lot of lawyers and contracts and stuff, but I can't imagine working within the medical world.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. We have system upon system that is broken. And the first place that I say is to start is with my own shadow, my own nervous system, my own shadow. The minute I want to lash out at someone else, I've trained myself to go and try to see deeper than that. And the more we can see people deeply, no matter what they did, in their divine essence, the more these things will change. When parents can be conscious enough to support their children by being there and being present and giving them the love they need and the nurturing they need, it's a lot of it's just starting to recognize that I'm passing down the things that have been handed down through generation after generation to generation. But it's all born in this thing that we call trauma, which is basically unfinished past. It's unfinished because it isn't in alignment with divine law. And so we can call it all kinds of things. You might call what I'm talking about as forgiveness, but I put it on another level of just the general, okay, I forgive you. It's more a matter of coming to grips to see yourself in the other person, the perpetrator. Can you see yourself in the drunk driver? You said yes. I can see that. That's more important to me than saying I forgive you as a declaration. It's, yeah.
No, and again, I agree with you. I'm not trying to quibble over that. I'm just not wanting to be too dismissive of what somebody means when they say that.
Yes.
We could assume they mean one thing, but maybe they have a great and a deep appreciation for it, in fact.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, the more I can feel you feeling me, feeling you with other people, the more that confusion goes away. Integrity is not morality. Integrity is wholeness. Integrity means it's whole. We have many breaks in our integrity in terms of the human condition right now. That's why I'm, two things. I'm very focused on the shadow work, and I'm very focused in building communities like you are, where the healing can take place, where people can actually be felt, seen, heard, held, and protected with others, and feel safe enough to not lead to those kinds of things that end up with rape and murder and drunk driving and overdosing and all the different issues that are out there. But even if you look at the law, Wade, and say, at the legal system, pretty much any of the laws are kind of a stopgap because people are not operating with integrity, with wholeness.
Well, of course, couldn't agree more. And, even the transition from Moses, the lawgiver, to Jesus 2,000 years ago already unpacked that, right? And Paul's explanation, the law was a schoolmaster training us to bring us to the fulfillment.
Right. Exactly.
So, but sadly, and then Paul also said to the Corinthian church, basically, you're not weaned yet, and you need somebody to go back and teach you the basics again. You didn't get it. He says, you're drinking milk, and you should be at this time able to digest meat. Strong meat belongs to those who, through reason of use, have exercised their senses to discern good and evil. So along the biblical journey, you have the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which in the beginning, people were told not to eat. And then, you have the whole serpent story, and we could spend hours unpacking that. I think it's an amazing story, a misunderstood story, a misapplied story, but a perfect story. When we fast forward, Paul unpacks it by saying, basically, God always intended you eat of that tree. At the time of maturity, you were supposed to be using your senses to learn how to discern good and evil. Everything that happens to us in this physical world is to give us opportunity to process and self-actualize, if you will, that the individuation that has happened is a necessary path towards having that law, as it says, written on our inward parts.
Yeah. But I want to kind of go back a little bit, because we started out talking about fear, and to understand that fear freezes, and that's a lot of what's getting stuck. So how do we move from frozen to fluid reality to get out of that state of fear freezing? And we do that by engaging with it consciously, where we can move towards a more fluid reality, which is characterized by integration and openness.
I love it, but we're out of time. So that's the great segue. That's the great segue to the next time we meet, which you've got a surgery coming up, and God willing, that will go very well, and we'll have a chance to meet again. But from fear, which freezes, to fluidity, because Jesus talked about rivers of living water flowing through us. So we're going to pick that up next time, about how to unfreeze, unstick, get the fluid going after fear, when we meet again. Do you have any very brief, because we're really out of time, closing remarks for the audience today?
Yeah, I do have one thing. In all of this, we're moving too fast. My sermon of the day is soften and slow down and pay attention.
That's a hard lesson.
It's a big one.
But I couldn't agree more. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to slow down and open up this discussion, let it breathe, soften it a bit. And I can't wait till we meet again and talk about getting unfrozen. That's it for today. The next thing here is the sneak peek of next week's episode. But I will sign off today by saying, you are created in the image of God, and God loves his creation. We'll see you next week. Hey everyone, it's Wade Franson, and I'm here with a sneak peek for episode 203, airing on Sunday morning, 7 a.m. on Created in the Image of God on December 14th. I have in the studio Mark Vernon, who is an accomplished scholar and an experienced educator, journalist, ex-vicar, and so much more. And we've just had an amazing hour, packing so much into this show, and we've run out of time, but we're going to do a really quick sneak peek. So Mark, what can the audience expect when they tune in to hear your discussion with me on December 14th?
We live in a time in which many people feel the fear and worry that collapse is inevitable, but I think this is an invitation to discover where's the truth, where's the goodness, where's the beauty, even in the midst of all the dynamism of our times. And if there were one thing that I think we came to in our discussion, it's how to see that, how to perceive that more fully, using particularly the great figures of the Platonic and the Christian tradition.
Absolutely. And some of the men that you've done deep research into, like Dante and others who the audience will be delighted to hear about, but also some more popular figures like Frankenstein, vampires, and zombies that we discuss at the end. So there's something for everybody this coming Sunday at 7 a.m. Central Time on Created in the Image of God on December 14th. We'll see you there.